All right, hello everybody. This is GM Rikoo. It is the 27th of April 2014, Sunday. Lovely Sunday afternoon for myself, at least. I'm in the United States in Central Time. Stuart, who will be talking to me in just a second, is over there in the Britain lands, the land of the Brittanyes. And today we're going to be talking about. We thought it would be cool to start doing some live streams that kind of go over. Some of the different aspects of the development of Age of Ascent. We're going to be doing these once a month, every 2 weeks. We're not real sure yet what we're going to be doing exactly. So we'll be figuring out. You just need to follow us on Twitter at Age of Ascent. Or, of course, go to the age-of-ascent.com and always keep an eye on that. You can also follow us on Google+, Facebook, all that good stuff as well. But joining me today, and we're going to talk for about a half an hour or so about the setting of the game, is Stuart. Stuart, how are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Why don't you introduce yourself so I don't just call you Stuart, because that just sounds like, just some guy I met on the street. So why don't you introduce yourself to everybody and tell them what you do on the team?
Sure. So you already know my name, Stu, or Stuart is fine. I'm the creative lead on Age of Ascent. What that really means is I kind of marshal and shepherd all the stories and the backstories and the feeling for how we want the world to be and the settings, and to kind of bring in the ideas and try and make them all make sense.
That sounds like a pretty large job. How has it been so far, kind of dealing with coming into an entirely new IP? What's kind of some of the first steps that you're going to take?
It's always trying to get where you want to end up. What's your destination? And by that I don't mean you need to have the map and you need to know exactly which street and which house number you're going to, but we want to know the town we're going to so that we can aim for something.
Okay.
And so that's your very first step, is to say, where are we trying to get to? But
you have a history, don't you, in kind of creating worlds, right?
Yes, yeah, across a variety of things. It's not my day job by any means, but I am a writer, and I also work on. Sorry, my screen's just gone.
Oh, you're fine.
I also play LARP and do quite a lot of role play. So there's been a lot of world building in my life.
Now, I don't think we talked about the LARPing last time. That's an interesting. We'll have to talk about that, because I'm one of these closeted LARPer players, I guess you say. In the way that I've never actually played, but I'm like obsessed with it. I want to go actually do it sometime. But I'm in Texas. There's some of it here, but it would be great to try it sometime. So maybe we could role play sometime. But that's an interesting kind of area you're coming from. But you're also coming from, as far as approaching Age of Ascent, you're coming from a very scientifically kind of a grounded area, right, or background.
Yeah, that's right. So, my training is as a physicist. So I hold a doctoral degree in theoretical physics, not in astrophysics actually, but in quantum mechanics and the science of plastics and polymers. So you can look me up in various journals from when back in the days from when I was a physicist.
Well, I mean, you've got to be younger than me. It couldn't have been too far back in the day. That's interesting.
It's further back than I'd like to admit.
For a lot of people who might not know, one of the most well-known theoretical physicists is, I always say his name wrong, Michio Kaku? I can't even say his name, I'm sorry. He's on Daily Show a lot. What's his last name? I'll have to look him up. I'm always messing up his name, but he's a really well-known theoretical physicist, and what he does is he takes a lot, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stu, if this is kind of how you might have approached Age of Ascent, yeah. Is like you were saying, you want to get kind of the general area of the game or of the setting. He kind of says what will happen in the future. I saw a discussion with him recently where he said he was reading, I want to say it was one of Ray Bradbury's books, I can't remember, and said that it opened up to him the possibility that he had to expand his horizons even into theoretical, estimations of the future. And are you finding that to be a challenge with something like Age of Ascent, or are you enjoying that?
No, I really enjoy it. One of the things I like about sci-fi is I love the grand old tradition of sci-fi, whether it's pulp from the 50s or the really cutting-edge stuff of today, the stuff that explores the big ideas and says, this is where we are today. What if? What if? What happens if this happens? Or what happens if that happens? So for me, it fits right with the type of stuff I'm interested in, because it starts with today and it says, where do we go from here? What type of things might we see? And it doesn't say we will see these things, but it just plays around and it says, well, if this happened, then what would society look like? Or if we went there, what would happen? What would be the consequences? How would people react? And so for me, that's a brilliant thing about Age of Ascent, is because what we're trying to do and what we're trying to kind of encourage everybody who ends up playing is to bring their ideas, to bring their thoughts about where the world might be and how that might look.
Right, and so that's a good point, actually. We want players, and we already have a few players that are really not only kicking our butts during the dogfight play test, but also having some cool ideas. So we're encouraging players, if you're over at age-of-ascent.com, go to the forums. Definitely sign up. If you're not on there yet, you can also tweet us as well at Age of Ascent. But the forums are great for discussing ideas, because the cool thing about the way that illyriad-games is developing this is from the ground up. They're a very hands-on company. They love to hear from their players, and if you look at Illyriad, for example, they developed that game with tons, and they still do, with tons of impact from the players. Now, if you hear an idea though from the player base, what is your if it's fantastical, do you immediately try to debunk it, or do you try to kind of see how it fits in, or what's a process involved with, let's say, if you hear a really cool idea from outside of your own?
Well, personally, I love that, but I think if you want to take that and try and integrate it into the game, then the crucial thing to get right is to make it seamless, is to make it feel like it's not bolted on, and to kind of understand where that idea might take you, and to try and think more broadly than the idea itself, but try and think about how that might marry up. In all these sorts of things, whenever you hear some good idea that's outside what you thought before, it may cause you to go back and rethink some of the things you've done. Often what you'll find is, particularly with storytelling, is that you'll come across something, or you'll have some sort of epiphany, and it might be somebody else who comes across your work and says, well, actually, you know what, it'd be really cool if you did that, or did you realize it came across like this, or did you realize the thing that you've done there doesn't work because... And when those kind of things come across, you kind of have to sit up and go, you know what, we need to kind of take a couple of steps back. We need to think through those things and see how we integrate them.
Right.
And then we'll go, and then we'll start again.
So there are some... Age of Ascent has some connections with some real life space entities. Is that correct? Some organizations.
Yes, that's right. So the Rutherford laboratory here in the UK, but also I know CEO James lives near Cape Canaveral because he's a massive space buff, and he's very into NASA. We're also using actual star maps. We're not going to be trying to hold ourselves to being completely accurate,
right? Because
if you think, however many 100 billion stars there are in the galaxy, there isn't a comprehensive catalogue there. We're going to aim for about 120 to 140,000 of stars that are reasonably known about. Those maps are going to be updated as we start to really kind of get to grips with our local stellar neighbourhood. But I think for us that's going to be a really good starting point. And we are talking to the people who kind of are the stewards of those maps, and we're talking to a lot of the community there to try and make sure this sort of thing that we're aiming for is as accurate as we can make it without clearly having any detriment on real gameplay.
Right. I think we talked about that a while ago, about a month or two ago, about the balance between realism and also fun, and I think we were talking about faster than light travel and all that stuff. And I think if you could talk a little bit about that, like how to face that challenge. Like, you're making a quote unquote realistic game, but you don't want people to literally have to travel for 6 months just to meet their friends, or they wouldn't be playing the game. So how do you approach
absolutely. That? And so one of the first decisions that was made was that we don't want near relativistic travel, and by that what I mean is we don't want you going 99.9% the speed of light, because if you are doing that, it creates a type of physical experience that the human brain isn't very good at processing.
Yeah.
But also and because of that, is just no fun to play. If it takes 2 days for your ship to slow down, if someone says to you, how long is it going to take you to turn around, and the answer is not a distance but a time, then at that point you've kind of lost any incentive to play that game in real time.
Yeah.
It also becomes impossible to pilot for a human. You're going to have to rely on AI. So we made a decision very early on to say, what we're really interested in is that visceral combat. We're interested in the ability to for friends to meet up wherever they want to meet up, and to do what they want to do. So what we looked at was some physical sorry, I'll start again. What we looked at was some theories in theoretical physics about faster than light travel. It's all highly speculative, obviously, but probably the most sensible one, and we're using his name with his permission, is some of the stuff put together by Alcubierre, and that would kind of covers the idea of folding space. And so it would allow you to, if you think of space as a sheet of plastic, it would allow you to kind of crumple it up and to put 2 points that might be on the opposite ends of that sheet, put them together by just folding up the plastic sheet, and you go there instantaneously. It would be like traveling across a room. It would be that sort of time. So we've got technology that would allow people to go to distant stars within the galaxy very, very quickly, and we think that is that makes a galaxy explorable in the sort of time that people have to play a game.
It's interesting. You're basically taking an exercise that exists from childhood, which is to imagine or dream of space or space travel or something similar, and you're trying to fit it into a reality. You're tweaking things here and there. It's hilarious because if you think about it, it's so inborn to us as humans, to sit and dream about these things. And then you get, what's great about this though is, of course, if you get to if you get to put something into practice, you can actually physically see it in the game, see how players respond. Because we were talking about that though with the realistic time. Like, let's say if it took 6 days to travel from point A to point B or something like that. I actually joked that there are actually some people, and I think we could, each of us on the team could probably say we'd actually sort of enjoy that in a kind of perverse, hard science way. Do you know what I'm saying? But for the general populace who would probably be jumping into the game, they wouldn't want to be traveling for 6 days of real time. It's an interesting thing.
It makes it very hard to have a fleet battle if it takes you a week to arrive at the combat zone. Well,
for example, in fantasy games I've played before, I always really enjoyed realistic travel, which meant that trade where you had, sort of like what happens in Illy. Illy is such a giant map. It's I think I was talking to Ben the other day about it being 2001 by 2001 squares. And so I love doing some basic math. If each square was an inch, how big that map would be. And so I kind of enjoy that fantasy of great size. But this is a game where you want people to be able to jump in. Speaking of that, we were talking a little bit before about the weapons and designing that. Now you're going to be involved with that as well, I take it, especially if you're involved in polymers and materials, right?
Yeah. So one of the things we're quite keen on is our construction and our fabrication processing. And that will, players, what we're aiming for, what we'd love to have is for players to be able to come in and start right at the beginning of gathering those resources and going all the way through to kind of building their space station. That would be a goal for us to achieve those sort of processes.
Sure.
What we want to base it all on is real elements. So we're going to use the periodic table as it is, and there's always room because of the way the periodic table appears to be mapping out when you go to very high energies.
Did I lose you? I might have lost him. I've lost my expert. What do I do? Let's see if we can get him back here for a second. Hang on. What we're talking about, by the way, while I'm waiting for him to come back is... Oh, I lost him. It'll get him back here in a second. Is Age of Ascent. If you haven't heard of Age of Ascent or if you haven't played it yet, we're talking about age-of-ascent.com if you want to go there. Stuart, you back?
I'm back, yes.
We lost him. Well, that's, this is pretty...
Where did you lose me?
You were talking about... I don't remember now because I tried to recover real quick. We're talking about the different...
we were just getting into the materials process.
Right, and building a station and that. Now, just so people know, if they're watching this now or watching this later, at the time you're watching this, all of this, of course, is up to changes. This is very early alpha stuff, but what you're watching on the screen is actually a recording of a play test we did, I think, last week. During my cockpit, we were trying out the new radar. So as you can see, just from the alpha footage, it's a game. It is these are players, we're fighting. It's actually a hell of a lot of fun to jump in and just shoot after some people. So I can't wait to see all this other stuff, even just a few of these other things put in here. So just keep that in mind. A lot of this is up to changing, and hopefully Stu's up to the challenge of changing if he needs to. So we're talking about building stations, players coming in using real periodic tables, the real periodic table for that. So if you want to talk some more about that.
Yeah, sure. So, the idea is that we want people to go through that kind of research and refining and processing and building kind of the whole life cycle of that, from getting your hydrogen out of dust clouds through to building stuff out of novel alloys, researching new ways to create energy. We'd love to kind of put all of that in I think, and what we really want to be able to do is have an entirely player-led economy. Although we have a whole kind of future history that leads up to the point that the game takes place, and that has its own political entities. Our view is that they should only take up a very small amount of the game world, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5%, and the rest of the game world will be ripe for colonisation, exploration, and wars to hold on to the nice bits by players. And that, if you think about it, even if players were to come in and settle another 5% of the star systems, that would be as much as all the NPC factions and nations and corporations added together. So our aim is in very quick order is for players to kind of essentially build their own ecosystem and economies, and to be totally self-funded and trading with each other.
Right.
And through that, what we want is some very clear paths to how you build a shield, how you build armor plating, how you build the life support systems for space stations, the whole thing.
I imagine there's a benefit though also if you're basing it in a real life, scenario-ish thing, as much as you can with a real life periodical table. There people could jump in and even just having a grasp of that from high school science class and all that, they might understand the game a little bit more, especially if the materials are responding to how they would, quote unquote, in real life. So that's a pretty interesting, because a lot of times pretty much I can't think of, there's a lot of games you'll find online that have realistic terms, or they use certain materials or whatever, but they don't necessarily make them conform to how they would in quote-unquote real life. So it's going to be interesting to see how players respond to having a semi-familiar setting, or at least a few semi-familiar circumstances. So how much can you talk about the actual lore yet, or are we waiting on that? I wasn't sure where we're at with that.
Yeah, so there's a reasonable amount. So I've been toiling away, kind of working out how we get from where we are today in the game to where we are in the game. And the game is set in 2176, and if we're in 2014 today, then there's about 8 generations worth of people to go till we get to that point. So what we've kind of come up with and locked down, and should be going up actually on the website in fairly shortly, I'd hope in the next kind of week, 10 days, will be our timeline with our future history. And we split that out by kind of key events across a number of different spheres of interest, whether they're political, whether they're conflict, medical, scientific. And in each of those, we say, on this date, such and such a thing happens, whether it's a massive flu pandemic, whether it is the discovery of being able to communicate across vast distances at faster than the speed of light, whether it's the first time Ark ships are sent from Earth because of overpopulation. And one of the things we've done is we've looked at each of today's major political power blocks, and not just necessarily countries, but looking at how groups of countries act together, whether it's NATO, whether it's the South American free trade groups, whether it's Russia and its sphere of influence, or even kind of emerging spheres of influence like India and all of those countries around it that it trades with, and looking at how those would develop over the next 170 years, taking us through to the point of the game. And probably one of the key things that has led up to what's the events as players will find them in the game is this idea of the age-of-ascent, which is the point at which the technology allows humanity to leave our solar system and truly explore the galaxy freely for the first time. And it has happened across in 2 stages in the game. The first ascent, as it's called, was 3 of the power blocks, and they were the first to reach the stars. And then within a generation, the other 6 power blocks had also all kind of looked at their neighbours and gone, we're not going to be left behind. So they devote huge amounts of resources, and that's the second ascent. And it's basically about 10 or 15 years after that second ascent that we set the game, and that the players themselves are now at that point where people are beyond the reach of their governments, beyond the reach of people saying this is the way you must live, this is what's allowed, this isn't what is allowed. And so we say, right, there's that point, almost that Wild West point where people are saying, I'm going to go out there and make a life for myself. That's where the game is kind of coming in. That's where they will start.
That's where the danger would probably come in, I imagine, as well.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Interesting that you're not really placing it, 1,000 or 500 years in the future. It's a pretty immediate future. Do you find that it's a little? Do you prefer to do that, to have something that's kind of within an actual grasp of reality, or are you more comfortable kind of projecting out farther than that?
I think personally, I'm indifferent to that. What I think this offers us, though, and it offers the players too, is if you set it 1,000 years from now, it would be harder to have that sense of first exploration. I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that having it quite close to us allows us to do is allows us to make things feel relatively familiar without them being too alien. It's quite that science is advanced. If you think about where we were 160 years ago, and the advances in science and technology from then until now,
yeah,
and then you think, well, if we had a similar sort of continual growth for another 160 years, that's a vast change, but it would still feel relatively familiar. We recognise the societies we read about in the history books from 150 years ago. They may not have had electric lights, but we kind of understand the things they were struggling with. It's not so alien that we don't know what was going on. But the thing it really allows us to explore in the game is to say, nothing's set. There are no space empires. There are no galactic federations. There are no 1,000-year-old hegemonies that rule the universe, right, that players can't affect because they're so set and established. What we've got here is a galaxy that's right at the beginning of that, before any of these great empires arise. It's completely empty. It is completely empty. It's waiting to be filled, and that for me is the exciting bit. Is that we can give players this clean slate and say, look, there's a bit here, but guys, this is for you to fill. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's funny because in Iliad, for example, people will still talk about some of the original wars and battles, and they'll mention those things with almost a reverence, like their holy text or something, and that was a few years ago. So yeah, it's a neat opportunity to see whenever you're developing a game from the ground up like this, and also you're developing the lore, the setting, how things work. You get to see how things are going to change and it's going to become its own lore thanks to the players, which is always.
That's exactly what we're hoping for. I mean, we would love to see our players come along and say, this thing happened to us. We've written some stories about it, and it's out here, and it's 50 light years, it's 50 jumps from the nearest kind of NPC. But it's a whole thing that's happened. This is what we're really proud of. Nobody expects it to happen, but now this is our land. You guys, when you come here, you pay tax. Blah blah blah. It's our nation. We've done this.
Right.
And that's the type of story we want to encourage. Absolutely.
So, how much can you talk about the actual kind of maybe ships, weapons, anything like that? Are you kind of still in development of that? Are you just kind of, and what's your approach to that? Do you just kind of get an idea and sketch it down and see how it would work, or are you working with James to kind of go for a certain style, or how does that work?
Yeah, so where we are right now, and this is partly us trying to kind of keep it as real as we can. We're trying to come up with the rules by which we will design our weapons and our loadouts and your defences against them, and the types of skills that you'll need in order to use them. Where we're going at the moment is you see lots of lasers in space in science fiction, right, whether it's on the TV or in movies. Sometimes they make noises, sometimes they don't. but when you actually look at the physics of it, lasers are very expensive to use, and to be honest, they're not that effective. If you have a great big piece of armor plating, then they're not necessarily going to do as much damage as if I get up really close with some high explosives and blast them in your face.
Right.
So what we've tried to adopt is a slightly different approach, and this is where we are right now, and it's clearly, it may be subject to change if we decide it doesn't work from a gameplay point of view. But where we're trying to go right now is say, look, it's not your first line of defense is your shields, and then you're down to your armor, and then you're blown up. What we're saying is actually you use different defenses depending on the weapon. If someone is a very long way away, they don't want to be firing ballistic weapons at you because A, they take a long time to get to you, and B, in that time you can go somewhere else and not be hit. So what somebody who's a long way away from you wants to use is a weapon that's going to get to you very quickly. So they may very well use a laser. Against an energy sort of weapon, you want a shield. You don't necessarily want armor, because shields can, for whatever reason, and there are some pretty good physical reasons for why you'd want some sort of electromagnetic barrier. That will stop your laser. But is that going to? But if someone gets up close to you with the ship equivalent of a shotgun and sprays that in your face, no magnets are going to help you there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You're going to have some armor plating. And so what we're saying is look, all ships can have a limited loadout, and depending on your mission, depending on what type of thing you're running, whether you're in a fleet and you have a specific role, or whether you're a spy, or whether you're a scout or a trader, you're going to choose your loadout depending on what you expect to encounter out there. And then you're going to have your fingers crossed that you don't encounter something you weren't expecting. You'll see people who'll try and do a jack of all trades. Jack of all trades have they can survive a little bit of everything, but if a guy is concerted to take you down one particular way, then you're going to have to get out of there, because you're not going to survive against a very focused attack. So we're trying to turn it a little bit on its head, and rather than have shield and then armor and then you're blown up, we're saying, you know what, you're going to choose your weapons depending on what you think you're going to be facing, and you're going to choose your defenses likewise. The types of weapons we're going for are energy weapons like lasers, ballistic weapons, which are basically slugs of metal that rip through your armor and all the soft bits inside, and then missiles and other high explosives. And between those, they cover our ranges, they cover our speeds, and they cover the types of damage that we want to do. And so our defenses and the types of things that your countermeasures they all kind of balance those three things out. So you'll have, in any sort of squad, you will probably have a couple of guys who are snipers. They'll sit back and they'll use long-range weapons, and they'll probably try and do specific things with those weapons, or counter the other guys on the other squads with those weapons. You'll have the guys who'll be up close and personal, who'll be extremely heavily armored. They'll have they'll have the equivalent of a shotgun. The difference between a laser and a shotgun, obviously, is a laser just uses energy. So if you've got an onboard generator, you're never, in theory, going to run out of ammo. With a shotgun, you've got a limited number of shells. You've got to get your job done and then get out of there before your gun's empty. So there's going to be all these sorts of considerations that people are going to have to balance out, and that's just from what, in theory, is just 3 different types of damage. But we're going to have factors of range. We'd like to have factors of the different types of damage they do, what their considerations are about how skillful you have to be to use them. So although we're going to be try and be quite authentic about what we think would work in space, rather than just making it battleships in space, we're going to actually try and work with the physics of how would these weapons work in space, and how easy would it be to use these weapons. We are going to try and balance everything out with countermeasures and skills and loadouts.
Well, what's interesting about what you're saying is we're talking about giving players several possible choices, but then we have, if you've been watching the playtest, or if you've been participating in the playtest, all we have right now in the playtest, because it is an alpha and we're just really getting the PvP aspects worked out, is we have the same ships using the same basic weapon, and already you're seeing players, like there's one player, I think he had, correct me if I'm wrong, we'll correct this later, but I think he had something like a few dozen kills, if not 60 kills yesterday or whenever it was. And so you're having players already using the familiarity of that one ship and that one type of weapon, and finding ways, like I found myself dodging, trying to hide behind the larger craft that's in the play test. You're already finding players using strategies even with that limited one weapon. So I can only imagine what's going to happen when you have players having the ability to outfit their craft with all sorts of different weapons, because you're just going to have, it's going to be so interesting, because I'm sure it's going to challenge you as somebody who's trying to come up with the reality of it. This player is using that in a completely different way than I expected.
Yeah, absolutely, creating completely unexpected effects. Yeah, that will be sometimes people call it nerfing, but I'm sure there'll be a load of what I think is more technically called balancing issues.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Which has to come. But like I said, if anybody doubts it, jump in the play test on a Saturday. We normally have those at 4 p.m. every Saturday. Now why am I completely forgetting that? Let me just jump on the site real quick. 4 p.m. Eastern every Saturday. And if you jump in, it just is going to load you automatically, and you're using the same ship as everybody, until, of course, we add other ships to the playtest and the same weapons, and you're going to find yourself using strategies And I noticed some players go slow and try to peek around, and other players are just trying to use their thruster as much. So it's going to be very interesting to see. Well, we're going to
absolutely. Yeah. And if you want to see kind of where we're going, where we'd like to go with that, and then throw your own kind of ideas into what you think would be cool, go and look at some of the stories. There's one particular story which is all about a siege of a newly built battleship, and about a group of players who arrive to try and kidnap the battleship, take it over, and escape with it just as it's coming off the production ramp, literally. And that in that we kind of we describe exactly, you know, a number of different types of combat which the different squads deploy in order to kind of do what they need to do to get hold of that battleship, or to defend the battleship from the attackers.
Wow, that's over on age-of-ascent.com in the forums, or where would that be?
That's on the website. So it's one of the stories. If you go to about on the website,
that's right,
then there'll be some of the stories there.
Yeah, the about has a ton of information, great about a lot of stuff we're going to be planning for it. You know, it's really interesting to see where this is going to go, because if you're familiar, and as I am with Illyria and watching where that went, it's pretty crazy. Considering a lot of people think this is a completely different game from Illyria. It is in its physical, you know, controls and stuff like that. But the scope you're going for is pretty insane. So we're going to keep these streams. We're going to be doing these about, I want to think we're probably going to do them about every 2 weeks, maybe a developer interview, if not every month. Stuart, you're going to have to come back on, of course, sometime and talk more about further developments.
Absolutely.
Especially because I like keeping you up late there, you know, because I know you're not, it's not like you have a couple kids that keep you tired or anything like that. I don't have any, so I can stay up anytime I want. But anyway, thanks for joining me. What we're going to do, though, is if you have suggestions, you're watching this after hearing what Stu's talking about, we're just talking some of the general stuff right now. We'll get into more specifics as the playtests get more and more detailed. Go over age-of-ascent.com, join the forums, tweet us at age-of-ascent. We also have a Google+. All the different social networks you can find us on. You can actually just Google Age of Ascent as well. You know, like I said, tweeting us is probably an easy way also to get just some direct contact. We're always on there. But go over and fill out, you know, if you have some information, even if it's just lore or you know, an idea. This is a great opportunity to get into a game from the ground up, and it's been a blast to see what the players are doing with just the playtest. It's hilarious to see. I don't know if you've been playing them, Stu, but
I've made a couple. I didn't make yesterday's, but I've made most of the others.
It's getting murderous. Some of these players are just, like I said, they're 60 kills. I want to say I think he got. It was on our Twitter. I'd have to check it in the player, but it's just like, you know, they're figuring it out, and I'm kind of amazed. You know, this is just a playtest, so I can't wait for the thing to have, like, even if we just added one more weapon, consider that, and then
exactly.
And then you're talking about all these other things, so that's really fantastic. It's going to be great to see. But thanks for joining me. If you have any questions, like I said, you can tweet us or go over to the website, fill out some information there. And other than that, thanks, Stu, for joining me.
Thank you.
Sorry to keep you up late.
No problem.
And have a good day, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.